I be feeling like this too sometimes when I ride for too long.
When 50 Cent disses you, it isn't just rap beef, it's a death sentence for your reputation. Over the years, he's built his career not only on making hits, but on exposing lies, fake images, and the dark politics that keep the music industry running. And in his eyes, 6 people stand out above all the rest. These aren't just rivals, these are the ones he's painted as the most dangerous, the most manipulative, and the most corrupt players in hip-hop. One of them once tried to erase him from the industry. Another pretended to be family before stabbing him in the back. And one name on this list might shock you the most. So let's break down the 6 names that 50 Cent has openly or indirectly branded as evil. At number 1, we have Irv Gotti, most likely his betrayer. Every story of hate has an origin, and for 50 Cent, that origin has a name, Irv Gotti. Now, Irv wasn't just another industry exec chasing hits, he was the architect behind Murder Inc., the label that dominated the early 2000s. With Ja Rule topping charts and Ashanti cranking out hit after hit, Murder Inc. felt untouchable. On the surface, it was all success. But behind the glossy album covers, a bitter war was bubbling beneath the surface. The cause of hate? Irv's unshakable loyalty to Ja Rule and his choice to treat 50 Cent as an enemy instead of just another competitor on the come-up. Their shared roots in Queens made things personal. According to 50, when tensions with Ja Rule escalated, Irv didn't try to de-escalate or stay neutral. He doubled down. He turned industry politics into all-out warfare, and the proof of that grudge runs deep. 50 has claimed that Irv actively tried to blackball him from the industry, pressuring DJs not to spin his records, warning insiders not to collaborate, and using his power to close doors before they even open. In hip-hop, reputation is currency, and Irv allegedly tried to bankrupt 50's before he ever had a chance, but 50 wouldn't back down. His infamous diss track, Back Down, wasn't just a lyrical strike at Ja Rule, it was aimed at Irv's entire empire. He painted Murder Inc. as corrupt, manipulative, and rotten at the core. Then came the darker chapter. In 2003, Murder Inc. was raided by the FBI over alleged financial ties to Kenneth Supreme McGriff, a notorious Queens drug lord. Though Irv and Ja denied wrongdoing and fought through the storm, the shadow of that investigation gave 50 all the ammo he needed. He branded Irv not just as a rival, but as someone entangled in something far more sinister. He further said, Irv Gotti was afraid when the feds came. He never did nothing.
You never did nothing. Right.
For fans, this beef was electrifying Queens versus Queens, a clash of titans that split the hip-hop world. But for 50, Irv Gotti wasn't competition. He was the man who tried to erase his destiny before it began. And in 50's eyes, that level of betrayal wasn't just personal, it was pure evil. Continuing at number 2, Sean Diddy Combs. When you think of 50 Cent's enemies, you probably expect gunsmoke, hood politics, or diss tracks. But with Diddy, it's different. This rivalry isn't rooted in street beef, it's about something far bigger. Power, business, and the way the music industry preys on artists. Unlike Irv Gotti, who stood in 50's way because of loyalty to Ja Rule, Diddy represents something else entirely. To 50, he's not just a mogul, he's the blueprint of how to climb to the top by stepping on everyone beneath you. And that's where the hate begins. For years, Diddy has carried the reputation of being a businessman first and a label boss second. The accusations stretch back decades. Once the shining star of Bad Boy, blasted him publicly for refusing to release his publishing rights, even after offering Diddy $2 million in cash. The LOX, legendary in their own right, went on New York radio in 2005 to confront him live, saying he held them hostage with contracts that robbed them of their freedom. Shine, who went to prison after the infamous nightclub involving Diddy and Jennifer Lopez, later expressed his deep disappointment at how Diddy distanced himself once the trial got serious. Then there are artists like Black Rob, G-Dep, and Day 26 names that all tell the same story. Talent chewed up and left behind, while Diddy walked away richer and more powerful. For 50 Cent, that kind of pattern isn't business. It's exploitation dressed up as opportunity, and that's why he's made Diddy a target. Over the years, 50 has clowned him relentlessly, calling him a and accusing him of milking Biggie's legacy long after his death. He's taken shots on social media too, using cryptic captions and memes to stir the pot, hinting that Diddy hides industry secrets that other rappers are too scared to bring to light. He also said he doesn't want Diddy around him or near his home.
I don't want that old around me, you old ass.
What makes this different from 50's other feuds is the weight of evidence. This isn't paranoia, there are receipts. The LOX battle over publishing rights really happened. He really did beg for his freedom and was denied. Countless artists really did walk away from Bad Boy bitter and empty-handed. To 50, that makes Diddy more than just competition. It makes him the face of everything wrong with the music business contracts that shackle, promises that vanish, and power plays that leave artists broken. And yet, Diddy's public image tells a different story. To the mainstream, he's the life of the party, the man who coined "can't stop, won't stop." He's champagne, yachts, and shiny suit. But 50 sees through that smile. In his eyes, Diddy is the wolf in designer clothing, the perfect example of how the industry builds idols who profit while everyone around them struggles. Fans, as always, are divided. Some say 50's obsession with Diddy is just trolling that he's using him as a punching bag to stay relevant. Others believe 50 is the only rapper bold enough to challenge someone considered untouchable, a man whose influence runs so deep that most artists wouldn't dare speak against him. And that's what makes this rivalry so fascinating. It's not just a clash of egos, it's a battle over perception. Because at the end of the day, for 50 Cent, Diddy isn't just another name on his enemies list. He's the embodiment of what 50 calls industry evil. The type of mogul who shakes hands in public but makes ruthless moves behind closed doors. A reminder of why 50 has never trusted the system and why he's built his empire on his own terms, outside of anyone's control. Now, at number 3, Ja Rule. No list of 50 Cent's enemies could ever be complete without mentioning Ja Rule. If Irv Gotti was the architect of the opposition, Ja Rule was the rival who stood directly in 50's path. Their beef isn't just another hip-hop feud. It's one of the most infamous, personal, and destructive wars the culture has ever seen. The root of their hatred? It depends on who you ask. Some say it started in the late 90s, when Ja Rule was robbed in Queens and later saw 50 Cent hanging out with the man accused of taking his chain. Others believe it was jealousy over street credibility. 50's raw image versus Ja's mix of gangsta bravado and radio-friendly love song. What's undeniable is that the tension between them wasn't just rap, it was real. And it escalated fast. By 1999, fists turned into bullets. 50 was famously shot 9 times in front of his grandmother's house in Queens. And while Ja Rule has always denied involvement, the streets buzzed with speculation about murder inks, connections to Kenneth Supreme McGriff, a notorious Queens. What made it worse? Ja Rule and his crew allegedly mocked 50's shooting in public, turning his near-death experience into a punchline. For 50, that was unforgivable. From that point forward, his mission was to put Ja Rule in his place. Funny how he bought the first 4 rows in his concert to get him angry.
4 rows in his concert.
The proof of this vendetta is etched in hip-hop history. Diss records like Back Down painted Ja as soft, while Wanksta mocked his credibility so viciously it became an anthem. Then came the brutal Hail Mary remix, where 50 joined forces with Eminem and Busta Rhymes to dismantle Ja on wax. Interviews, magazine covers, radio appearances, 50 left no stone unturned in branding Ja Rule a fraud. And he did it with surgical precision. The fallout was devastating. In the early 2000s, Ja Rule was at the top of the charts, dominating radio with hits like Always on Time and Livin' It Up. But once 50 Cent and G-Unit caught fire, the tide shifted. 2003's Get Rich or Die Tryin' didn't just make 50 a superstar, it made Ja Rule look outdated overnight. Fans who once sang along to Ja's melodic hooks now laughed at him, labeling him the singing rapper who couldn't go toe-to-toe with 50's raw aggression. By the mid-2000s, Ja's career had collapsed under the weight of ridicule, while 50 sat on top of the rap game. For fans, the rivalry was entertainment gold. For 50, it was personal justice. He saw Ja Rule as everything wrong with the industry: envy, betrayal, fake loyalty, and image over authenticity. And in 50's world, that was evil. Even decades later, the fire hasn't cooled. Whether it's Instagram jabs, memes, or sly comments in interviews, 50 never misses a chance to remind Ja Rule and the world that their war never really ended. To this day, their feud stands as the ultimate reminder that in hip-hop, some rivalries aren't just competition, they're lifelong. Up next is number 4, The Game. If Ja Rule was the enemy from the outside, The Game was the snake from within, and for 50 Cent, that betrayal cut the deepest. Their fallout wasn't just another rap beef. It was one of hip-hop's most dramatic implosions, because it wasn't simply rivals clashing. This was mentor versus protege, teacher versus student, brotherhood turned blood feud. At first, it looked like a dream alliance. The Game, a hungry Compton rapper, signed to G-Unit in 2003 under Dr. Dre's Aftermath umbrella. The plan was simple. Dre provided the beats, 50 provided the cosign and songwriting, and The Game would bring raw West Coast energy back into the mainstream. It was a perfect formula, and the plan worked. In January 2005, the Game released his debut album, The Documentary, which instantly went multi-platinum. The album was loaded with hits How We Do, Hate It or Love It, and West Side Story. Behind the scenes, 50 Cent claimed heavy involvement, saying he wrote or contributed to at least 6 tracks. Suddenly, the Game was a star, positioned as G-Unit's West Coast crown jewel. On paper, this was East Coast firepower meeting West Coast hunger, a dynasty in the making. But beneath the surface, egos were colliding. For 50 Cent, G-Unit wasn't just a label, it was a code. Loyalty was everything. If he had beef, his soldiers had beef. That meant the Game was expected to stand shoulder to shoulder against Nas, Fat Joe, and Jadakiss, all of whom were on 50's enemy list. But when asked in interviews, the Game refused to play that role. He said he had no issues with those rappers and wouldn't be dragged into conflicts that weren't his own. To outsiders, the Game's stance sounded smart and diplomatic. To 50, it was treason. He saw it as his protege trying to stand apart from the crew that gave him a platform, enjoying the benefits of the G-Unit machine without embracing its battles. That, in 50's world, was the ultimate disrespect. The breaking point came quickly. On March 1, 2005, just weeks after the documentary dropped, 50 went on Hot 97 and announced live on air that the Game was officially kicked out of G-Unit. Hours later, chaos erupted outside the radio station. Shots were fired, one man was injured, and the feud transformed into front-page news. What should have been hip-hop's strongest alliance had turned into one of its ugliest public divorces. From that moment on, the gloves were off. The Game retaliated with 300 bars, Runnin', a scathing 15-minute diss track where he relentlessly tore apart 50 and the entire G-Unit roster. It wasn't just a song, it was an onslaught, a lyrical bloodbath that left no doubt about his intentions. 50 fired back with tracks like Piggy Bank and ruthless skits mocking the Game's persona. Diss records flew from both camps, each one adding fuel to the fire. Fans were divided right down the middle. Some believed the Game was standing his ground, carving out his own identity rather than living in 50's shadow. Others said he bit the hand that fed him, betraying the very man who opened the door to superstardom. Either way, the hip-hop community couldn't look away. The drama was too raw, too personal, too explosive. Over the years, there have been fleeting moments of peace. The two have occasionally appeared in the same spaces without trading insults, and at times they've even hinted at reconciliation, but those moments never last. The wound runs too deep. For 50 Cent, the betrayal of the Game isn't just another entry in his long list of feuds. It's personal. A protege who turns on his mentor isn't just disloyal, he's evil. And even 2 decades later, 50 never lets the world forget. To him, the Game will always be remembered as the snake from within, the one who turned family into enemy and loyalty into war. Next, we have number 5, Rick Ross. If the Game was the snake from within, Rick Ross was the fraud exposed. And for 50 Cent, there's almost nothing more unforgivable than fakery. The roots of this beef trace back to 2008, when Rick Ross was riding high on his image as the boss, a Miami heavyweight, who rapped vividly about drug trafficking, kingpin life, and street dominance. With his booming voice and luxurious aesthetic, Ross had carved out a persona that felt untouchable. But then came the leak that changed everything. Photos surfaced online of Ross in a crisp uniform, working not as a hustler, but as a corrections officer in Florida during the mid-90s. For most rappers, this revelation could have been shrugged off. But for Ross, whose entire brand revolved around being a street general, it was catastrophic. And 50 Cent, always quick to smell weakness, pounced immediately. To 50, authenticity was currency in hip-hop, and Ross had just been exposed as bankrupt. In an interview, he throws shade at Rick, saying, "What kind of rich nigga cuts his own grass?"
What kind of rich nigga cut his own grass? Why you out there cutting your own grass?
What followed was one of the most relentless humiliation campaigns in rap history. 50 dropped the mocking diss track Officer Ricky, Go Ahead, Try Me, complete with skits and ad-libs ridiculing Ross's law enforcement past. But he didn't stop there. He weaponized the internet at a time when memes were just beginning to shape hip-hop beef. Cartoons, viral videos, and parodies flooded YouTube, all crafted by 50's team to paint Ross as a fraud. Then came the personal attacks. 50 infamously produced a video featuring Ross's baby mother, where she exposed intimate details about Ross and even appeared shopping with 50. The spectacle was brutal, pushing the feud beyond music into the realm of pure humiliation. And when that wasn't enough, 50 turned his sights on Ross's allies. He dropped one of the most disrespectful videos aimed at DJ Khaled, exposing private footage of Khaled's mother, crossing a line that even fans admitted was shockingly personal. Ross did fire back. His track Mafia Music sent shots at 50, and he attempted to downplay the corrections officer scandal. But for a while, it seemed like 50 controlled the narrative. Online, Ross was the punchline. Officer Ricky became shorthand for fraudulence in hip-hop. And yet, here's the twist. Unlike Ja Rule, who crumbled under 50's pressure, Rick Ross survived. He doubled down on the music, releasing powerful records like BMF, Blowin' Money Fast, and Aston Martin Music. Slowly, he rebuilt his credibility, shifting from fake kingpin to respected industry mogul. By the 2010s, Ross had signed major acts like Meek Mill and Whale, turning Maybach Music Group into a powerhouse. Still, in 50's eyes, the stain never washed away. To him, Ross is forever Officer Ricky, the embodiment of hip-hop's worst sin, building an empire on lies. Even if Ross won the long game in terms of music and longevity, the beef remains one of the most iconic examples of exposure, humiliation, and survival in rap history. And finally, at number 6, Lil Wayne. This one might surprise a lot of people, because when you think of 50 Cent's enemies, you usually think of names like Ja Rule or the Game Guys, tied to personal betrayal, street wars, and bloody beefs. But Lil Wayne? That feels unexpected. And that's exactly what makes this story so interesting. See, with Wayne, it wasn't about Gunsmoke in Queens or record label politics. It was bigger than that. For 50 Cent, Lil Wayne wasn't just another rapper, he was a symbol of something deeper, a direction in hip-hop that 50 saw as destructive. Let's rewind to the late 2000s. This was peak Lil Wayne. He was unstoppable, dropping mixtapes at a pace nobody could match, destroying features, and sitting on the throne as the self-proclaimed best rapper alive. By 2008, his album Thaw Carter 3 had sold over 1 million copies in its first week, a historic feat that cemented his dominance. And when he launched Young Money, he introduced the world to stars like Drake and Nicki Minaj, literally shaping the next decade of hip-hop. But 50 wasn't impressed. What he saw was an image that felt, in his words, dangerous for the culture. The tattoos covering Wayne's face, the lean drinking, the flamboyant rockstar energy, it wasn't the same raw street storytelling 50 believed hip-hop should stand on. To him, Wayne represented a shift away from authenticity and discipline into chaos and self-destruction, and 50 didn't hold back. In interviews, he flat out mocked Wayne, saying he looked like a rock star on. He suggested Wayne was being used by the industry pushed as the face of hip-hop because he glorified destructive habits that, behind the scenes, made labels money while tearing artists apart. For 50, this wasn't just about Wayne as a person, it was about what he symbolized. A new wave of artists being packaged to sell lifestyles of addiction, excess, and recklessness to millions of fans. Now here's where it gets interesting. At the time, a lot of people dismissed 50's comments as jealousy or petty shade. After all, Wayne was everywhere, breaking records, and 50's own dominance was starting to cool off. But looking back years later, some of 50's critiques almost feel prophetic. The conversations around rap's relationship with lean, pills, and addiction have only grown louder, especially after the tragic losses of younger artists like Juice WRLD and Lil Peep. Strangely, 50 was raising the alarm long before it became a mainstream concern. Of course, for Wayne's fans, this all felt unfair. Many argued that 50 was reaching that Wayne's creativity, his experimentation with style and sound, was pushing the culture forward. To them, 50 came off as bitter, unable to accept that the crown had passed to someone who didn't fit his mold of what a rapper should look like. And in truth, the feud never escalated into full-scale diss tracks or violent encounters like 50's other wars. It stayed mostly at the level of jabs, interviews, and mocking comments. But for 50 Cent, Lil Wayne wasn't just a rival to clown, he was a symbol of what he considered industry evil. The manipulation of an artist's image to glorify destructive habits, the packaging of pain as entertainment, the shift from survival stories to self-destruction, sold as cool. That, in his book, was as evil as anything Ja Rule or Irv Gotti ever did to him. But here's the craziest part. 50 isn't done. Even today, he continues to take shots, drop posts, and clown these names whenever he gets the chance. For him, revenge isn't a moment, it's a lifelong sport. But the real question is, was he right? Were these 6 truly evil, or was 50 just projecting his own battles onto the industry? Because if this is the list he's revealed to us, you have to wonder who else is on his mind. Who are the names he hasn't spoken yet? And if this is just the surface, what other secrets still lie beneath hip-hop's darkest rivalries? What do you think? Drop your thoughts below, because this story isn't finished, not even close.